What's up, everybody? My name is George. I'm the lead producer that put together the debut album from World Bazaar called Awareness Aligned. Ryan from World Bazaar and I have worked tirelessly to discover the techniques that we have to put together the album Awareness Aligned. And as a way to share the experience of the creation of the album, we have been telling the story of the behind the scenes into the methods that we use and the pitfalls we found, trying to get the album to sound as best as we could make it. And in this video, we'll be talking about the guitars. There's another video on the vocals and another on the drums. These fundamental elements have a lot of story to tell in and of themselves, and I hope that you enjoy and find it inspirational or insightful, and if anything, makes you more curious to want to listen to the final product that we were able to put together, this labor of love, the World Bazaar album, Awareness Aligned. So go check that out. It's on all the major places, and we'd love to hear from you on what you think there. So in the video, just for a quick shot, we're going to be going over universal audio plugins and sound toy plugins, the different effects that we chose to shape the guitars in the way that we did, both the bass, the clean, and the distortion, and the way that we layered and mixed multiple guitar tracks with different microphones. So stay tuned to check it out. I'm going to jump right into it. So if we're gonna talk guitars, we might as well talk about the instruments themselves that were used. Ryan, a one-man band, played the guitars, the bass, the drums, the vocals, and wrote all the songs. And him and I together created the overall tonality of the album using the several tools that we'll talk about in the rest of this video. But many years back, as Ryan got into recording, he got himself a home studio set up using Logic Pro and a Roland Studio Capture interface, and he plugged in his Paul Reed Smith Hollow Body 2, recording from both the piezo out and the direct out of the guitar, as well as a Ed Roman bass, or abstract bass as it was called, which was custom made for Dave Maros from Ed Roman. So those were the two instruments that were used to record all the bass and guitar in the album, but it goes a bit further in what you actually hear overall from the project. So Ryan got these recorded cleanly into Logic Pro, and then in order to take the guitars a step further, he went to a studio called Blue Room Studios up in the DC, Maryland area. There he utilized their many different microphones and amp heads to be able to use a technique called reamping to get a lot of different stockpiles of recordings of his guitar riffs, utilizing these different characteristics of microphones and amps. That way he could pick and choose to kind of shape and form the tone of his sound. So what I mean by reamping is they would take this clean recording that Ryan had captured with the Paul Reed Smith from both the piezo and DI, and they would play those out of the Roland JC120 amplifier, and they would play the clean tone of both the piezo and the DI through that amplifier, re-recording directly from the amp, utilizing the characteristics of an arsenal of different microphones. And then after capturing all the clean, they recorded his distorted tone using his GT100 pedal with the high gain stack setting. And they utilize all these different mics again. So there was many different microphones that were utilized, from the standard microphones like the Shure SM57 up to a Neumann TLM103, to AKG C214, and Sennheiser 904, a Neumann U87. So Ryan was able to collect all of these recordings of these different microphones, reamped from his guitar. And later, as he parted ways with Blue Room and him and I met up, that is what I had to work with when creating with Ryan the overall tonality of the guitars that we put together for the album, trying to be consistent from song to song and coming up with a method that worked best. Through all the different microphones, we ended up picking the AKG C214 for our clean guitars, and the standard SM57 as the microphone of choice to layer with our distorted guitar tones. So let's go ahead and look more at the guitars themselves and look at the techniques that were used to get them to sound the way they do. Okay, so throughout the entire album, when we do our distortion guitar or delay in general, we whether it's clean or distortion, we're gonna be reaching for the UAD precision delay. Absolutely love this thing. And it's more of our subtle delay, just a nice rich and clean version of a delay tone for us, that we usually just do a linked 1/4 delay for both the left and right side, and give it a varying degree of mix or dry wetness there, usually in the 50 to 75% range. Often in the effect chain, we'll be reaching for the LA3A as our compressor of choice to kind of keep our vocals and guitars in the pocket, and it just does a great job without doing things you don't want it to do to the mix. And then a favorite that, is definitely kind of a weapon that we reached for a lot inside of our mixing was the SPL Twin Tube processor. It's a harmonic saturator that just does a fantastic job of giving a nice poke to your frequencies that you're trying to make stick out in the mix without necessarily turning things up. Often when we wanted a guitar to just kind of stick out a little bit more in detail, by just turning up the saturation a little bit on a particular harmonics, you can really make things peek out into the mix that were kind of hidden before without necessarily turning up the volume on the track or that particular instrument. So absolutely love the SPL Twin Tube. We typically just reach for it for the guitars, but sometimes the vocals even, and just give it a little bit of that saturation there to add a lot of grit or pleasant distortion and make things pop. That was definitely a great tool in the guitar rack there. And then of course we'd throw on a common EQ, remove the low end that did not need to be inside of our guitar tracks. And that's always a go-to process, is to remove unnecessary low end to make sure you're getting the appropriate headroom and by giving the space to the things that do live in the low end frequency range, and not letting unnecessary hidden artifacts or unaudible low end energy being taken up by instruments that don't need to be presenting it, right? So always cut out the low end out of the things that don't use the low end kind of deal. But yeah, that's the general chain that goes on the guitars themselves. So let's take a look at the returns next. So for the guitars, before we start throwing too many effects on, we will make sure that we get the mix of the piezo DI and the AKG for the cleans or the SM57 appropriate before going too crazy with the effects. So using the recorded distortion we have from the SM57 microphone, we then blend in the virtual distortion that we create using the clean DI and piezo that we've taken from Ryan's original recordings, and we distort those using the Universal Audio Soft Tube amp room bundle, particularly the metal amp room. We load up a preset, we tweak the knobs out with the presence and the overall distortion within inside that amp simulator, and blend that in with the SM57, and that gets us our raw overall distortion. A little bit of EQing and panning, and that's the tone that we work with, then applying our effects to. Starting off with usually delays is our first go-to. I like to put the SPL Twin Tube, the LA3A, and the precision delays directly on the guitar tracks that they're going to be affected by. But then I like to mix my guitars individually and as a whole through the bus into these different returns. So let's go to some of the returns and take a look at how we utilize those. If you've seen some of the other videos, you know that we definitely enjoy going to the Sound Toys Decapitator, an excellent plug-in for mixing. I like to use the decapitator on the guitar for a bit of drive, and again, just a little bit more presence in the mix. Kind of more of an overall drive than where the SPL Twin Tube kind of picks a harmonic to accentuate. But I also like to use the decapitator's tone shaping, kind of shape the tone of the high and low or bright and darkness of the guitar tone itself, whether that's an individual track with the piezo, the DI, or the SM57 or AKG, or overall as a group, the distortion or the clean or the solo. So you can see here that we have this guitar preset that I start from called More Edge. I like to use, start with presets often developed by the manufacturers that seem to be the most applicable to my situation, and then reverse engineer them to taste to fit my needs. Oftentimes you'll find you have to do a lot less reinventing the wheel when you kind of follow the path of the experts and check out what they have preset. So, I go to these guitar More Edge. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Usually when I'm going to the decapitator is, again, more drive, more bite, and again, these tone shaping techniques here. Then we really like, for more a deeper affected version of delay, we go to the Echo Boy analog quarter and eighths preset, where on the track itself, we're using the precision delay with a linked left and right 1/4 delay. We're here in the Echo Boy that has a different timing set for its left and right side of the signal. So we're doing a 1/4 linked precision delay on the track itself, and then into the return, we'll feed it to this 1/8, 1/4 left-right delay. It's because this effect is on the return track, and the mix of the effect into the song is done through the mix of the send there, I'm able to put the return at a full 100% wetness, and then, you know, apply to taste how much of the depth of that effect is inside of the song by how much I feed it from the send itself. This has a lot of control that you can apply as far as how much of the effect you're looking to have, and messing with the feedback, saturation, and the overall type or mode of the effect down there in the bottom, whether dual echo, single echo, ping pong, rhythm. These are the different things that we would play with to kind of get the individual flavor for any given song of how we wanted that delay to behave. But a little bit of this analog quarters and eighths mixed in with that precision delay, doing that hard 1/4 on the left and right synced, and it gives a very nice sound that we enjoy for what we were looking for the album. And then, of course, you got to have a, we pump a little bit into our drum room just to kind of put it into the same space as the drums, so putting a little bit of that natural convolution reverb into the guitar there for both the clean and the distortion. And finally, the other return that we run our guitars through, particularly the cleans across the entire album, is always into some reverb. And in this instance, we have really fallen in love with, as you might have seen in some of the other videos, the Audioease Altiverb reverb, which is a convolution reverb that is really top tier. And in this case, we're using the EMT 140 preset for the type of reverb we like to send our clean guitars into through the send and return channels. A lot of what made us be able to get to the end result of being satisfied with the mixing of our guitars came with the techniques of how to be organized with mixing all these different guitar layers together and individually approaching the different sections of the song, and how the energy or levels of the different guitar layers are during those different sections, whether the verse, the chorus, the solos, and things of that nature. So before we end this video, we got to talk about the bass guitar. That was, honestly, there's not near as much to say as it did to shape our cleans and distorted. Early on in the process, we definitely overdid our bass by pumping it up too much, putting on too much additive EQing, compressing, tried all kinds of things to get big fat bass guitar, but it turns out the more that we could keep the integrity and the natural flavor of the bass that was recorded, the more it shined. And nothing gave a more transparent and realistic virtual representation of the bass sound that we wanted than Universal Audio's Ampeg B15N bass amp simulator. This gave us tons of varieties of bass guitars, as well as bass amplifiers and cabinets, to be able to try out and shape and find the sound that worked best for a particular song and just kind of overall throughout the album. We were often going between, do we choose the cab with horn or without horn? Whenever you utilize the horn, you get a little bit more top end, mid-range off the bass, get a little bit more picky elements, and some of the songs fit better without that top end mid-range, and some really shined with it. So those were usually the choices, and otherwise didn't really put much into the bass besides the typical returns of the decapitators in the drum room and things of that nature. Well, guys, I hope you found all this insightful, helpful, or just a lot of fun. And that if you were on the fence for any of these plugins, whether it was the Universal Audio plugins or Sound Toys, etc., Ableton Live, that it gives you the confidence that you needed to kind of go off and jump in. I got to say that I'll be using these tools for a long time, and will definitely stand behind them as game-changing tools to have in your toolbox. So everybody go enjoy some music out there. I hope that you go pop on the World Bazaar album, Awareness Aligned, and thanks so much for watching. Cheers.